Hey guys, Dusty here. Today I want to talk all about stack height and heel to toe drop in running shoes. And if you've been watching my channel for any amount of time, you've probably heard me talk about these terms many times, or other people on YouTube talking about it. You might have heard it in your local running store. And today I'm just going to explain what each one is and kind of the differences within each of those terms. And first of all, right off the bat, you should know that stack height and heel to toe drop are highly individual. What works for me and what I like might not work for you. So with that in mind, let's get right into it with stack height. So stack height, very simply, is the amount of material that's between the bottom of your foot and the ground. So we'll take this Nike Vaporfly, for example. In the rear, under your foot, you have 40 millimeters of midsole material, and in the forefoot, you have 32 millimeters of midsole material. And this is what would be known as a high stack shoe or a max cushion shoe. And actually, World Athletics has put a limit on what professional runners are allowed to run with on the road. And this is it. This is the limit. A professional runner doing a road race can't race in a shoe that has more than 40 millimeters of stack height. So these shoes with big, thick midsoles that are known as max cushion shoes, typically they're more popular options when it comes to long runs, sometimes recovery runs, racing a marathon. And one of the negatives about running in a high stack shoe is typically you tend to lose a lot of that ground feel just because there is such a big amount of material between your foot and the ground. And then on the flip side of that, you have really minimal shoes. So something like this is the Asics Tarther-Zeal 6, kind of an old school racing flat. And in the forefoot in the shoe, it only has a stack height of 10 millimeters. So pretty minimal. Or something like the Vibram 5 Fingers, basically no midsole. You just have an outsole on the bottom of your foot. And with a shoe like this or the 5 Fingers, there's basically very little midsole or stack height to cushion the impact. So you're more using your body to absorb the impact, kind of using like your calf muscles as shock absorbers. And one of the reasons someone might like a lower stack height shoe is, as opposed to something with a high stack, you're going to get a lot more ground feel. So that's stack height, pretty simple stuff. Basically, the higher the stack height, the more midsole or the more material that's going to be underneath your foot. And then that leads us into heel to toe drop, which will reference the Nike again. So in the rear of this shoe, like I mentioned already, we have a stack height of 40 millimeters. And then in the forefoot, we have a stack height of 32. So 40 minus 32 is an 8 millimeter heel to toe drop. And basically what that means is your heel is going to be sitting 8 millimeters higher than your forefoot. And I would say there's kind of 4 different categories of heel to toe drop. The first being a zero drop shoe. So Altra, this is the Altra Escalante. This is one of the more popular brands when it comes to zero drop shoes. And essentially a zero drop shoe is going to have the same stack height in the rear and the forefoot. And typically with a zero drop shoe, that's usually going to favor someone who has more of a midfoot to forefoot foot strike. And it's often recommended if you switch from like a high stack shoe to a zero drop shoe that you do it gradually, because your Achilles and calf muscles are going to be working a lot harder in a zero drop shoe than they typically do in a higher drop shoe. Then you have low drop shoes kind of from that 1 to 4 range. And then after that, we have the mid drop range, which is probably the most common. That's kind of like the 5 to 8 millimeter drop range. And these shoes tend to be really versatile normally. So a shoe like this is the Hoka Mach 4. You can do everything in this shoe. Good for easy runs, short runs, long runs, you name it. This shoe can handle it. This shoe in particular has a 5 millimeter heel to toe drop. And this category is certainly one of the more common drops out there. It can be a great place to get started if you're just getting into running. And then that leaves us with high drop shoes. So shoes that are kind of over that 8 millimeter heel to toe drop would fall into this category. So this shoe here in particular, this was one of my favorite racing shoes before the carbon plated high stack super shoes came along. But this Asics has a stack height of 20 millimeters in the rear and 10 in the forefoot. So this shoe has a heel to toe drop of 10 millimeters. And typically shoes that have a higher heel to toe drop tend to be suited more for people who are heel strikers. And for myself, depending on what pace I'm running at least, I tend to strike kind of from midfoot all the way to the rear. I definitely do better kind of in the mid to high category of drop when it comes to running shoes. And on race day, usually the higher the drop, the better for myself. So like this shoe used to be my go-to, and then Nike Vaporfly came out. This has an 8mm drop, and yeah, high drop shoes I run faster in than low drop shoes. But again, that's just what works for me. That's what's suited to my preferences, my running style. So that's stack height and heel toe drop in a nutshell. It's not the most important thing when buying your next pair of shoes. It can definitely be part of the conversation when you're buying your next pair of shoes, but it shouldn't be the end-all be-all. And for myself, I run in everything. I run in really high stack shoes with a high heel to toe drop, and I also run in more minimal stack shoes with zero drop, like the Ultra Escalante that I showed you. I think it's good, especially in training, to mix it up, work some different muscles by using different shoes with different stack heights and different drops. Race day, that's a little bit different. I know what works for me and I'll stick to that. And yeah, I hope that clears up some confusion if you didn't know what stack height and heel to toe drop were before this video. And if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe for more everything running. And I'll see you in the next video.